There is a peculiar moment in life, though few recognize it while it happens, when you catch yourself staring into a window and suddenly notice that the reflection staring back is not entirely your own. Not that it belongs to someone else, no. It is still you, but it feels strangely scripted, as though the way your head tilts, the curve of your half-smile, even the very thought behind your eyes, were chosen long before you ever had the chance to decide. It is in this moment that the strange suspicion arises, perhaps. You are not living the life you think you are. Perhaps this isn't the first time you have walked these streets, worn these clothes of flesh, spoken these lines. Perhaps this reality is less like an open landscape and more like a stage, where you arrived with your role already whispered into your bones. The title, "This is not your real life, but you agreed to live it anyway," is not an accusation nor a condemnation. It is a quiet disclosure, as though someone slipped you a note between the pages of your own story, revealing a truth you've always sensed, but never dared to articulate. The idea is unsettling, yes, but not entirely unwelcome. It suggests that before you were you, before the first breath of this current existence, there was a conversation, somewhere beyond the reach of our present senses. You sat at a table that was not really a table, in a room not bound by walls, and you were shown the shape of a life. Not all the details, those would come later in the unfolding, but the essential pattern. And you agreed. You said yes. You stepped forward. Why would you agree to live a life that is not entirely yours? That question becomes the doorway, the first step into a hallway lined with mirrors of varying clarity. Some mirrors will show you the illusions that keep you in place. Others will reveal the deeper design. And as you walk this hallway, you may find that not your real life does not mean false in the way we usually think of it. It may mean that what you are experiencing now is a constructed realm, a kind of dream architecture, a temporary container where lessons, trials, and encounters can take place in ways that raw reality, whatever that truly is, might never permit. Imagine this life as a painting, vivid and textured, hanging in a vast gallery of infinite works. You are not the paint itself, nor the canvas. You are the one standing before it, yet for a time you have chosen to step inside its frame, to walk its roads, to speak with its painted people, to feel the weather that only exists within its pigments. To those inside the painting, the wind is real, the rain is cold, the joy is warm. But to the one who remembers that there is a world outside the frame, the truth is different. It is real enough to matter, but temporary enough to be released. Some call it a dream, others a test, a karmic weave, a divine experiment. Whatever the name it points to, the same possibility, you, the you behind the you, consented to this experience. Perhaps you wanted to understand courage, or forgiveness, or love stripped bare of all its idealized forms. Perhaps you wanted to feel the weight of limitation, so that you could rediscover the wings you had forgotten. Or perhaps, and this is the most humbling thought, you agreed, because someone else's growth depended on your presence here. You might be the catalyst in another's awakening, the missing note in someone else's song. This reframes the ordinary. Every moment of frustration, every unexpected detour, every encounter with a stranger in the street might be part of an arrangement you helped design before you arrived. The hardships then are not punishments, but invitations. The joys are not random gifts, but reminders of the world beyond the frame. And yet, while we walk here, it feels as if this is all there is. Bills must be paid, bodies must be cared for, relationships twist and tangle. The weight of the everyday can pull the gaze so close to the surface that the greater pattern vanishes from sight. Still, the faint whisper persists, especially in the quiet hours, when the noise of the world subsides. It says there is more, not more in the sense of more possessions, or more recognition, but more reality, behind the reality. like a hidden script behind the visible words of a page. There is a deeper text that tells you why certain faces return again and again, why some places feel hauntingly familiar though you've never been there, why certain decisions feel less like choices and more like inevitabilities. Acknowledging that this might not be your real life is not an invitation to reject it or drift away from it. In fact, it can deepen your engagement. If you see this as a realm you entered by agreement, then every moment becomes an act of conscious participation. You are no longer merely reacting to events, you are remembering your role in weaving them. This remembrance does not make the pain vanish, nor does it erase the mystery. Instead, it transforms the pain into a form of dialogue and the mystery into a living question you carry with reverence rather than fear. The deeper implication is staggering. If you agreed to this life, then somewhere, in a space beyond forgetting, you carry the memory of why. That memory may be buried beneath the debris of daily survival, or wrapped in the veils of collective belief, but it is there. To touch it is to awaken, not into a new life, but into the truth of the one you are already living. And from that awakening, the landscape shifts not in its outer shapes, but in the way you walk through it. This introduction is the first crack in the painted sky, the first ripple across the still surface of the dream. We have not yet stepped beyond the frame, but we are leaning toward it, feeling the subtle gravity of the greater world beyond. The journey ahead will lead us deeper into the architecture of this arrangement, its themes, its symbols, its practical resonances. We will wander through the myths we unknowingly live, and we will see how they anchor themselves in the most ordinary details of our days. If the introduction opened the door to a strange and humbling possibility that this life is not your real life, but one you chose to inhabit, then the core themes are the architecture holding that doorframe in place. These themes are not intellectual abstractions. They are living currents running through every conversation, every disappointment, every joy that catches you by surprise. They shape the texture of your days and the very way you interpret the world. To name them is not to pin them down like specimens under glass, but to trace their outlines as they flow around and through you, much like mapping the wind. By watching the movement of leaves, the first theme that emerges is consent before incarnation. The idea that your being here is not an accident of chaos, but the result of an agreement, made in a state of clarity far beyond what we presently remember. In that clarity, you may have seen a network of connections, threads stretching across time and space, each one linking you to certain souls, places, and moments. You may have recognized the necessity of entering this woven tapestry, not because it was perfect or easy, but because it held within it the precise conditions for something your deeper self longed to explore. This leads directly into the second theme, life as a designed illusion, with real consequences. It is tempting to hear illusion and imagine something to be dismissed, something that doesn't matter. But in this context, illusion is more akin to a stage play. The stage is constructed, the costumes chosen, the props placed with intention. The events are arranged, yet the emotions you feel are entirely real. A love story played out in a theater may be fictional, but the tears in the audience's eyes are genuine. Likewise, the narrative of this life may be structured, but the growth it produces, the transformations it ignites, are not illusions at all. They are the very reason for entering the illusion in the first place. The third theme could be called the veil and the forgetting. Part of the agreement to live this life involved stepping through a threshold that erased your conscious memory of the larger truth. You arrived here with only subtle echoes of what you once knew, fragments that slip into dreams, déjà vu, or sudden inexplicable longings. This forgetting is not a cruel trick. It is a necessary condition. Without it, the immersion would fail. A game loses its meaning if you know every move in advance. A test of patience collapses if you already hold the answers. The veil ensures that your choices, struggles, and awakenings arise authentically from within the lived experience. Another theme rises naturally from this: hidden companions and recurring souls. If this life is a chosen stage, then you did not cast yourself alone. The people who shape your path, whether through love, rivalry, mentorship, or even betrayal, are often the same souls you have encountered across other lifetimes or dimensions of being. They play different roles in each incarnation, but the bond remains sometimes masked, sometimes glowing like an ember beneath the ash. This theme reveals the interconnectedness of all encounters, reminding us that chance meetings may be rehearsals long in the making. Running alongside all of these is the theme of choice within structure. Agreement to live this life does not mean every detail is predestined. The structure, the setting, the key relationships, the pivotal challenges may be established, but within that framework, your free will dances. Every reaction, every decision, every moment of surrender or resistance becomes part of the living script. You may not be able to choose the storm, but you can choose whether to stand in the rain, run for shelter, or learn to dance beneath the thunder. This interplay between fate and freedom is one of the most potent aspects of the arrangement, for it allows both the integrity of the design and the surprise of genuine evolution. Perhaps the most profound theme is the purpose behind the pain. In the absence of the larger perspective, suffering often feels meaningless, even cruel. But if we accept the possibility that we agreed to this life, then every wound carries a hidden intent. Pain becomes the pressure that shapes the diamond, the fire that tempers the blade. This does not mean that pain should be romanticized or sought out. It is still pain, still real in every fiber, but it reframes it as a teacher rather than an enemy. It becomes part of the curriculum you chose, even if you cannot yet see the entire lesson plan. Layered over all of this is a quieter theme, the call to remember. At unexpected times, something in life stirs a recognition that cannot be traced to any moment within this existence. A smell in the air, the angle of light at dusk, the cadence of a stranger's voice, and suddenly, you are somewhere else. Someone else. Aware of a home you cannot name. This is the deeper self. Calling through the walls of the stage, set a reminder that while you walk this life fully, you are more than what this role can contain. Taken together, these themes form a living framework, not to be memorized or recited, but to be felt. They are the quiet harmonics beneath the noise of the world, guiding your steps in ways you might not see until you pause and listen. To live with awareness of them is not to withdraw from life's stage, but to play your role with a depth of presence that transcends mere survival. You become an actor who remembers they are also the playwright, the audience, and the theater itself. In the chapters ahead, these themes will come alive through symbolic narratives, stories that are not mere fables, but mirrors, reflecting the inner mechanics of this agreement. Through these stories, we will see how the veil is woven, how recurring souls find each other, how the designed illusion bends to the choices made within it. We will see how the pain, the joy, the absurdity, and the longing all serve a design far more intricate than any single mind could hold. There are truths so delicate, so interwoven with the fabric of being, that they resist direct explanation. To grasp them, one must step sideways into story, into metaphor, where the mind loosens its grip and the heart begins to listen. In the realm of this is not your real life, but you agreed to live it anyway, symbolic narratives become lanterns in the fog, revealing the hidden architecture without tearing away the veil too abruptly. One such story begins with the weaver and the mirror. Long before this life, before time itself could be measured, there was a weaver who spun realities the way a poet weaves verses. This weaver, neither wholly male nor female, neither old nor young, invited certain souls to a hall filled with mirrors. Each mirror reflected not just the self, but entire lifetimes' possibilities stretching out like rivers branching into oceans. One mirror might show a life of power and solitude, another a life of obscurity but deep companionship, another a path littered with hardship yet crowned with profound insight. The weaver never told the souls which mirror was best, only asked, which reflection will grow you into the truth of yourself? You, standing among those mirrors, chose the one you now inhabit. In that choice, you accepted the distortions that would come with it, the forgetting that would cloud the memory of the hall, knowing that the very fog would make the journey meaningful. Another tale is that of the Garden of Borrowed Faces. In this garden, every flower was a person, and every person a flower, each taking turns to bloom in different shapes. One season, a tall iris might return as a small violet, yet still carry the scent of its prior blossoming. Souls wandered through this garden before entering their next life, brushing past those they had loved, clashed with, or barely noticed before. They would agree wordlessly, in a language made of feeling, to meet again in new forms. A rival from one lifetime might choose to return as a sibling, a lost friend as a passing stranger, whose brief kindness shifts the course of your day. You would not recognize their face when you met again, but something in their presence would stir a strange familiarity, as though the scent of their prior bloom still lingered in the air. Then there is the allegory of the bridge of two skies. Imagine a vast expanse between two realms, the true home and the temporary life. Between them stretches a bridge, woven of threads you cannot see from here. To cross into this life, you must walk the bridge, and with each step, the threads of memory slip away, falling into the mist below. Yet, one thread remains tied around your wrist, a subtle, invisible link to where you came from. This thread tugs gently at certain moments. When you hear music that makes you weep without reason, when you stand before a horizon and feel both joy and loss, when you hold someone's hand and know without logic that you have held it before, that thread will lead you home when this life is done, though for now, you only sense its pull in fleeting ways. A more intricate parable is the agreement of shadows. Before stepping into this life, you met not only with those who would bring you joy, but also with those who would test you, wound you, and even betray you. In the higher clarity of that pre-life realm, you understood that some lessons cannot be learned without friction, without the tension of opposing forces. You may have clasped hands with a soul and said, "In the next life you will play my adversary, and I will curse your name. But through this, I will find a strength I would never discover otherwise." They in turn might have asked you to be the obstacle in their path. In the forgetting of this life, such agreements seem cruel or absurd, but the shadow and the light are woven of the same cloth when seen from beyond the veil. Finally, there is the story of the lantern keepers. These are souls who remember more than most, not the full truth, for that would shatter the game, but enough to sense the shape of it. They walk among the rest of us, leaving small glimmers in their wake. A sentence spoken at the right moment, a kindness offered without reason, a book left in your path, a look in their eyes that says, "I see you, even if you don't remember me yet." You may have been such a keeper in other lives. You may be one now without realizing it. The lantern you carry might not light the whole road for others, but it can illuminate the next step. And sometimes, that is enough. These symbolic narratives are not meant to be taken literally, nor dismissed as fantasy. They are maps drawn in the language of the soul, pointing toward truths too vast for the intellect to hold in its bare form, whether you believe them or not. You may find they echo in the quiet places within you, as though some part of you already knows the weaver, has walked the garden, has stood on the bridge, has made the agreement, has carried the lantern. To live with these symbols is to navigate life with a different kind of compass, one that measures not distance, but depth. It invites you to see every person as a potential gardener of your growth, every obstacle as a thread in your chosen design, every fleeting joy as a glimpse through the veil. In this way, even the most bewildering events begin to shimmer with the possibility of meaning. To hold these ideas in the mind is one thing. To let them breathe inside the small, ordinary moments of daily life is another entirely. Theories about the nature of reality, agreements before birth, and symbolic patterns may ignite curiosity. But their real power unfolds when they are allowed to shape how you move through the world. The practice is not about withdrawing into some lofty detachment, nor about clinging to mystical notions as a way to avoid the rawness of living. It is about carrying this deeper awareness into the texture of each day, so that the awareness itself begins to subtly alter your reality from within. It begins with the pause, the space between reaction and response. When something unexpected disrupts your life, the natural reflex is to resist, to grasp at control, or to lament the unfairness of it all. But if you remember that this life may be a chosen stage, and that you agreed to step into its script, the pause becomes an opening. In that breath you can wonder, why might I have agreed to this moment? What might it be asking of me? The answer is rarely immediate, but the act of asking changes the way you meet the experience. You move from resistance toward curiosity, and in doing so, you open yourself to transformation. Integrating these insights also means seeing others through the lens of shared agreements. The stranger who cuts in line, the friend who unexpectedly disappears from your life, the colleague who undermines you in subtle ways. Each could be fulfilling a role that was set in motion long before this lifetime. This doesn't mean tolerating harm without boundaries. Rather, it invites a deeper form of compassion. Even as you stand firm in protecting your well-being, you can hold the possibility that this friction serves a greater purpose for both of you. This softens the bitterness that often clings to conflict, replacing it with a quiet respect for the mystery of the other's path. The awareness that pain has a purpose can also shift the way you process suffering. Instead of collapsing into the belief that hardship is random or meaningless, you can frame it as a form of apprenticeship training for the soul. The loss that shatters you may be the very crucible in which your capacity for empathy is forged. The betrayal that hardens your trust may also be what teaches you discernment without cynicism. This is not a call to romanticize pain, but to recognize that in the context of the larger agreement, it may carry a gift that will not be visible until much later. A subtle but profound integration comes from tracking moments of resonance, those flashes when you feel an unexplainable familiarity or significance. The street you've never walked, yet feels like home. The instant comfort with someone you've just met. The eerie repetition of a certain symbol in your life. These are the tugging of the invisible thread tied to your wrist, on the bridge of two skies. When you notice these moments, you can honor them by slowing down, by lingering in the feeling, by asking quietly what they might be pointing toward. Over time, these small recognitions weave a map of meaning through the landscape of your days. Living with this awareness also calls for gentle courage, the willingness to act in ways that align with the deeper script, even when those actions defy conventional logic. You might feel an inexplicable pull to change careers, move across the country, end a relationship, or start one. The mind may demand a rational explanation, but the soul often speaks in a language that bypasses reason. To integrate these insights is to trust that language enough to follow it, even when the path ahead is obscured. Another aspect of integration lies in letting go without resignation. Since this life is not your ultimate home, but a chosen journey, there is wisdom in holding its treasures and its trials lightly. To love deeply while knowing that every person, including yourself, will one day leave this stage is to experience love without the desperation of possession. To work diligently while knowing that the structures you build will eventually fade is to offer your craft as an act of devotion, not as a bid for permanence. Letting go in this way is not an act of despair, but of freedom. It allows you to be fully present, without clinging. In practical terms, you might find that these perspectives change the way you make decisions. You begin to value alignment over approval, choosing the path that feels truest to the quiet pull of your deeper self, rather than the one that garners the most applause. You may invest more energy in relationships that nourish the soul, even if they don't fit the conventional mold, and release those that deplete you, even if they seem perfect on the surface. The most profound implication, perhaps, is that life stops feeling like something happening to you and begins to feel like something happening with you. You are no longer merely a passenger swept along by the current. You are a co-navigator, aware that while you cannot control the river's flow, you can shape your own movements within it. This shift transforms the tone of your entire existence from survival to participation, from fear to reverence, and slowly, without fanfare, you notice that the veil thins. The small coincidences multiply. The sense of déjà vu becomes almost playful, and the ordinary begins to shimmer with an undercurrent of wonder. You realize that even the most mundane moments, washing dishes, waiting at a crosswalk, folding laundry, are part of the living agreement. They are as sacred as the grand turning points, for all of them are threads in the same design. If you have traveled with me this far, then you have already begun to live inside a different kind of awareness, one that bends the way light falls across the familiar landscape of your days. We began with the unsettling and strangely comforting premise that this is not your real life, and yet in some deeper, pre-remembered moment, you agreed to step inside it. We followed the threads of its core themes, entered symbolic stories that speak to the soul in its own secret language, and traced how these insights might take root in the practical soil of daily living. Now, as we draw the arc to its end, we find ourselves not at a conclusion, but at a threshold. For what is a conclusion in a reality that is itself a chosen chapter? The closing of this conversation is not an ending, so much as a returning to yourself, to the memory you have carried all along, to the silent agreement you once made in the clarity of the before. It is here that the call emerges, not as a demand, but as an invitation. Live this life, as though you remember that you chose it. To live this way is to stop seeing your existence as a chain of accidents, or as a puzzle forced upon you by some indifferent universe. It is to recognize that every encounter, every twist of fortune, every quiet heartbreak is a note in a song you helped compose. Even if you cannot recall the melody in its entirety, you can hum along to the parts you do know, trusting that the rest will come when it needs to. This changes the posture of your being. Instead of resisting what comes, you meet it with the curiosity of someone who wants to see what they once found worthy of entering. There is a kind of courage required here, but it is not the loud battlefield kind. It is the quiet courage to lean fully into the life you are living. Not because it is flawless, but because it is yours by agreement, by design, by the mysterious arithmetic of the soul. When you remember this, gratitude seeps in through the smallest cracks in the way the morning light touches the floor, in the shared laughter between strangers, in the way a single memory can keep you company for decades. This remembrance does not make life easier, in the sense of removing its challenges. The storms still come, the losses still cut, but you stand in them differently. You remember that the wind in your face might be the same wind you once asked to walk through. Knowing it's cold would teach you something no warmth could. You remember that the tears you cry now may water the very seeds you came here to plant. And you remember, perhaps most importantly, that nothing is wasted. Not the joy, not the sorrow, not the long seasons of uncertainty. From this perspective, even your smallest choices take on a luminous weight. To speak kindly, when you could have spoken sharply, is to shift the trajectory of the story. To step away from what feels misaligned, even when it is familiar, is to honor the role you came here to play. To forgive, to listen, to create. These are not just personal acts. They are movements within the design, ripples that touch the edges of the unseen. The transformational call is not about abandoning the life you have, nor about chasing some imagined real life elsewhere. It is about waking up within this one, becoming lucid in the dream you agreed to enter. It is about reclaiming your authorship, not by rewriting every scene to your liking, but by recognizing that you have always been more than the character you portray. You are the witness and the player, the dreamer and the dreamed, the one who walks through the painted world while knowing that beyond the frame, you are infinite. And so I leave you with this. Imagine tonight that you will fall asleep and meet the part of yourself who made the agreement. Imagine sitting with them not in words, but in the shared silence of understanding. Imagine them looking at you with a gaze both proud and tender, as if to say, "You are doing beautifully. You are exactly where you need to be." Let that echo follow you into tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, until it becomes the undercurrent of how you walk, how you love, how you endure. Because whether or not you remember the moment you agreed to this life, you are living it now. And every step you take can either deepen the forgetting or open the way to remembering. The choice, as it has always been, is yours.